immobile with a broken knee, I discovered something. It was all those hours of television. The much-beloved television show Friends is now streaming on Netflix. Millions of fans are wondering, will we ever leave the house again? Does anyone remember the one where Old Yeller died? For those of you uninitiated to this show, this episode centered around the character of Phoebe, who is at once incredibly wise and naive, street smart and oblivious. A delightful collection of personality quirks and warmth and beauty. Well, in this episode, Phoebe learns, to her horror, the real ending of the 1957 Disney movie Old Yeller, in which it is discovered that the dog, a yellow-colored Labrador mix, has rabies, and his owner is forced to put him down. Phoebe's worldview is shattered because she never before heard the rest of the story. Well, this is the 10th day of the 12 days of Christmas, and today we hear the rest of the story. The second chapter of Matthew tells of the visit of astrologers, of magi, to Jesus and his family. And then, in the continuing story, we hear this news. When the Magi had departed, an angel from the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod will soon search for the child in order to kill him." Joseph got up and during the night took the child and his mother to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod died. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet, "I have called my son out of Egypt." When Herod knew the Magi had fooled him, he grew very angry. He sent soldiers to kill all the children in Bethlehem and in all the surrounding territory who were 2 years old and younger, according to the time that he had learned from the Magi. As I am reading this, I can hardly believe I am reading this. Who wants to hear about the murder of children from a vicious king while the lights are still twinkling on the tree? Who wants to hear that the Holy Family is forced to run for the life of their child across the border to another country? But that is the piece of the story that we have today, as we commit to bearing our light, our candles, into this tenuous new year. So we start with Herod. Oh, he is the consummate villain. I mean, what can you say about a king who gained his throne by conquest, who held onto it by means of a secret police, who have personal bodyguards of 2,000 soldiers, a policy of violently putting down protests and demonstrations, and a habit of murdering family members, including his wife and 2 sons. Herod is a very bad guy. And when the traveling astrologers tell him that a king has been born, he does what he usually does in these situations. He sends someone to kill his rival. And in this case, thoroughness dictates that his henchmen target all the children in and around Bethlehem under the age of 2 years. Matthew quotes Jeremiah to underscore this tragedy. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and much grieving, Rachel weeping for her children, and she did not want to be comforted because they were no more." And in the midst of a story of political power turned deadly, we are asked to take a moment to recognize that mothers are weeping. People are heartsick and sorrowful because children have been lost. And I don't have to enumerate for you all the stories of loved ones lost to violence that splash across our computer screens daily. From multiple assaults in Paris to a church in Charleston, from a refugee camp in Syria to a community college in Oregon, from a theater in Louisiana to a home in Denver, Colorado. And because so many of these incidences of violence are connected to the rather loud national arguments about things like public policy and personal safety and issues around race and guns and the nature of policing, we sometimes forget the simplest, most basic fact at the heart of each of these tragedies. Someone is weeping. And someone cannot be consoled because the one they love has been lost. A friend of mine preached on Christmas Eve. Christmas comes into the world just as it is. Jesus is born, but not into a perfect world, into a world just as it is. And that means that Jesus comes into the world where every day children of God are lost, and other children of God are crying rivers of tears because of it. You know, I find it hard to imagine that God isn't weeping right along with us over all these losses. I believe in a God whose love and compassion for us means that God weeps. God weeps right along with us. God travels with us too. We hear that in the story. Jesus is warned of Herod's murderous plans and is able to escape with his wife to Egypt. Our Christmas stories tell us that Jesus was displaced, became a refugee to a country not his own. A Texas professor of New Testament reminds us of this sobering fact. If Joseph had received the dream to leave his endangered village and take refuge in a foreign country with his family in global political circumstances similar to our own, he would likely have been turned back at the border, told to wait it out and hope for the best in Bethlehem. When we read and hear of displaced people, when we hear the stories of hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children in camps in Iraq, in Kurdistan, in Chad, in Jordan, it's good for us to remember that Jesus was a refugee and one who found welcome in an unexpected place. The story of Jesus' birth is the whole gospel in miniature, all the big themes, all the important ideas. And that holds true for here, today. Jesus comes into a world in which powerful forces lash out at people and ideas that threaten their power. And Jesus comes into a world where there is tragedy and loss. Even though the rest of the story, it is not the end of the story, there's more to that passage in Jeremiah that Matthew did not quote. Thus says the Lord, keep your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for there is a reward for your work, says the Lord. They shall come back from the land of the enemy. There is hope for your future, says the Lord. Your children shall come back to their own country. Jesus returns from Egypt to a place that will become his home, to a place that will nurture him, to a place where community will sustain the child, to Nazareth. Listen to the rest of Matthew 2. After King Herod died, an angel from the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. Get up, the angel said, and take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel. But Joseph was afraid to go there, specifically to Jerusalem and to Judea. Having been warned in a dream, he went instead north to the area of the Galilee. He settled in a city called Nazareth. And isn't that the work of Jesus on our behalf as well? He always brings us home. During Advent, we sing this song of exile, of yearning for home. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. The deepest longing of the one in exile is simple: home. Just as Jesus and his family find a home in Nazareth, those who come to the stable find a home in him. Today we know that our home is in this manger, where we kneel with the kings and lay down all the burdens of our lives, along with the treasures that we have brought to him, with no treasure being more valuable to him than the treasure that we are, just the way we are. Don't change a thing. For Jesus welcomes us as is. And all of the rest he makes right. He makes it whole simply by our being here, by worshiping him, by being close to someone so good. But a little child will continue to lead us. So we can't let him stay in that manger. You may remember my story that we have to tie our baby Jesus into his manger at home because our cat likes to play with him all over the house. However, Epiphany is a season to untie Jesus and let him loose in the world. For he is our home. He knows what it is to weep and keeps vigil with us. He is our home. He knows what it is to be a wanderer and companions our journey. He is our home. He invites us to gather around a table and find an unexpected welcome. Thanks be to God. Amen.